So good to be back with you once again on the budget debate. Joining us on this leg forward, we've got Mr. Rahul Bajaj, Mr. Harish Salve, Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, and of course Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Swami and Mythili have stayed with us. Thanks very much, each one of you, for being with us. Dr. Kumar, if I may come to you, there are 4 tests that we are putting this budget to: the growth test, the fiscal test, the reform test, and the equity test. Let's begin talking about the growth test first. Do you believe this budget passes that? Dr. Rajiv Kumar?
Yes, I do think the budget passes that because it triggers investment. It is an investor-friendly budget. It has done a lot to improve the business environment, and I'm really pleased for what it has done to the micro, small, and medium enterprises by setting up the Mudra Fund and the 3,000 crore credit refinancing scheme, and also the scheme for the e-biz portals, etc. So because it is trying to improve the investment climate, I think it is a growth friendly and it will help accelerate growth in the coming years.
All right, we've got 2 of the tallest leaders of the auto sector, Mr. Sunil Munjal and Mr. Rahul Bajaj also joining in. Mr. Munjal, to you first. Do you believe the budget does enough to revive the investment cycle? Because, the last few budgets, despite all that they have done, the investment cycle hasn't quite kick-started. The government changed, the mood of corporate India changed, yet investment cycle didn't quite kick-start. Do you believe there's enough in the budget to kick-start the investment cycle and for growth to pick up as a consequence of that?
So on the one hand, you can actually never do enough to accelerate investment, to bring in more. But has something been done? Absolutely, certainly. I think he's done a very fine job of balancing the various interests and also the economic situation and the fiscal situation inside the country and outside. By accepting a year's slippage on the fiscal deficit and saying the headroom available from this, as also from the lower oil prices and lower inflation, will actually be used for capital expenditure from government sources, I think is a very good idea. It's one way to attract private sector investment in by growing the economy, because there has been a problem of the slowdown, consumption has been low, and the recovery is certainly later than was expected. We were expecting at least 2 quarters back to see a consumption recovery, which has not happened. So on that front, clearly he's done a good job. Also streamlining procedures, regulations, making taxation and regulations around GST, etc. more predictable. I think that allows companies to plan their businesses and their investment much better. So the answer is yes, he has done a fair bit. I think there are 2 or 3 other interesting things in here, which is pre-approved project reports. He's talked of those only in the power projects, but I believe and I think what they will do is, once it's successful here, they will roll this out in other sectors of infrastructure, which is what this country sorely needs. Because we are all aware of the need for infrastructure, but we've had an issue on getting infrastructure projects off the ground because of slow clearances and financial closure, which can certainly be done if the projects are pre-cleared. So there's a number of things. I just want to make one more comment actually. A little bit earlier I heard someone say this is only a pro-rich and a pro-industry budget. I think people have not realized he's raised service tax, he's raised excise, he's raised income tax, while he's removed wealth tax, but he's raised income tax more than he's removed from wealth tax. There will be about 8 or 9,000 crores extra, which will come in from income tax from the highest income paying brackets. He's done a number of things which has been a pretty smartly done things, and he's packaged them well. So all in all, I would say this is a well presented and a well run budget. It will really boil down now to the implementation of the number of schemes and programs that he's announced.
Thank you. Right, just to take a cue from Mr. Munjal and throw it at Mr. Bajaj. Rahul Bajaj, the budget cuts the corporate tax from 30% to 25% over the next 4 years. Plenty of exemptions done away with. Do you welcome this clarity?
Of course, but it depends on company to company. We all know, this is a perception, there's 30% to 25% over a 4-year period. No change in the fiscal 2015-16, and after that, in the next 4 years, the reduction. But people forget, they don't Rahul, remember that exemptions will all go. They forget, as the finance minister said, and which is a fact of life, though it would vary, I repeat, from corporate to corporate, that with a 30% rate, the total money that the government was collecting was about 22 or 23%. So the government will get more. They'll get 25%, but yes, some corporates will pay more, some corporates may pay less. I think Bajaj Auto is the kind of corporate which was already paying 28% or 27%, and so we may pay less. On the other hand, in the current fiscal, not the current, 2015, 2016, I'll be paying in Bajaj Auto, we have just made a calculation, 30 crores extra because of the 2% surcharge, the extra rate, which is on corporate tax as well as on dividend distribution tax. So we'll pay 30.
Right. Right. I think we've lost the audio there with Mr. Bajaj, but let me quickly get in a word from Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee. But I think the one area where no one's going to complain about is on the infrastructure thrust, and you summed it up beautifully earlier in the day as well. But what, according to you, is the most game-changing aspect as far as the infrastructure push is concerned? Is it the plug-and-play model that's come into play? Is it the increased allocation? What do you think is going to really be a game changer for infrastructure?
Actually, the real game changer is this very clear thrust on an investment, public expenditure-led investments in infrastructure, which is to actually provide the kickstart for a rapid ramp-up of economic growth. And I think an important point is what Dr. Arvind Subramaniam, who was here a little while ago, has written in the economic survey, that he specifically referred to the investments in railways as having an economic multiplier of 5. Now, if you ask me, the economic multiplier in infrastructure investments in roads or ports or inland water is not vastly different from the railways. So when you look at an economic multiplier of 5, you will realize that the big thrust on infrastructure is not just for the infrastructure sector, but with a multiplier of 5, it has a cascading effect on jobs, manufacturing sector, service sector, and has the capacity, as Dr. Subramaniam said, to actually raise the level, to raise the level of the tide so that all boats rise with it. So if you ask me, out of the 7 points I mentioned to you in the morning, I would still feel that the biggest game changer is this single-minded, concerted push on infrastructure-led growth, and that too in the short term with public expenditure and public finances powering infrastructure growth.
I also believe the other portion where nobody's going to complain about is the taxation and the attempt to simplify taxes, resolve disputes. Mr. Salve, if I may come to you, do you welcome the steps that have been taken? Has he walked the talk on ending tax terror? Has he walked the talk on ending ambiguity on India's taxation?
See, Supriya, the taxation reform is, as the budget itself tells you, work in progress. It's the Tax Reforms Commission report has come in and they are working on it. And that will really revamp the image of the tax department, which is, I think, a crying need for the day. But the other changes which have been brought into tax law, I've always been a votary of doing away with all these exemptions. A high tax rate, a relatively high tax rate of 30 with exemptions distorts taxation. There should be a flat rate of income tax, which, as there is now 25%, everybody knows of what you earn net income, 25% will go off tax, level it off of that. And I think that's a very sensible approach that does away with a lot of interaction between corporate India and the tax department. And the other minor changes also made. A lot will depend also, secondly, removing the GAR from the immediate horizon, declaring that whenever it comes, it will be prospective qua transactions. And thirdly, putting the lid on the direct taxes code, which was like a cloud hanging over everybody's head. I think these are all very positive measures. Apart from the most important thing this budget has done, it is truly a budget of federal India. 38% of the revenues for the union, 62% for the states.
A budget for federal India. Mr. Munjal, Mr. Bajaj, I want to get quick closing comments from you. Mr. Munjal, there was a lot of talk on manufacturing revival. Come Make in India was a clarion call made by the Prime Minister. Would you concede that there has been a bit of a disappointment that, we haven't seen the kind of detailing that one would have possibly expected in the budget to see a revival of manufacturing? No fiscal incentives for the manufacturing sector. Not much talk on labour reforms. Land, as we all know, is stuck in the parliament as well. Does that go down as a bit of a disappointment, Mr. Munjal?
So what we had said for manufacturing was, please improve infrastructure, help logistics improve, improve the labor regulation, and lower manufacturing taxes. When you put all of these together, the manufacturing clearly has a chance to become globally competitive. He's addressed some of them, but certainly not all of them. Cut off.
All right, he's addressed some of them, not all of them. Mr. Bajaj, if I may come to you, the thrust on manufacturing outside the budget doesn't quite resonate in the budget. Do you concur? Do you agree with us on that?
Yes, I'll add to what Sunil was saying, Supriya, and let's face it, there are political compulsions still. The Land Acquisition Act is a good example of how the complete lack of majority in the Rajya Sabha is coming in the way. Even an ordinance can't help because it has to be passed by both the houses. It can't be re-promulgated indefinitely. Only solution ultimately would be a joint session. And in the land acquisition thing, if the allies are not on board, even a joint session, this government may not have a majority. But that's an exceptional situation, and maybe it should be referred to a joint select committee of the two houses, etc., etc. That's not the subject for this discussion. But labor laws, or a reform of labor laws, is extremely important for ease of manufacturing, ease of doing business. But again, such a major law will not pass through the upper house because there is no bipartisanship here. Even during the day when I'm listening to the channels, you see the opposition in the Congress are all anti this budget, and obviously the BJP and the government are pro the budget. It's only when you occasionally hear an independent academic, but the academic has to be independent, not all of them are independent, or an industrialist who is prepared to speak his mind without trying to unnecessarily please the government, then only you can get a clearer picture as to where the government is going. Now, we can only hope that some states will do something about labor reform, because the centre, I think, is politically not in a position to bring in a bill for labor reform. It won't go through the house, upper house, and also they are really worried, including their own BMS, their own union, and maybe RSS, they will not allow the BJP to bring in labor legislation. So whether it's the land acquisition, the ordinance, or labor legislation, there are areas where there will be a problem. And what's obvious is, I would agree that in a budget, what could have been done for promoting growth, savings, investment, etc., what I think Jen Sinha mentioned, those 5 points, has been done. I'm fully supportive. But it doesn't mean automatically that domestic or foreign investment will come in. People will wait and watch the 5 mega projects of 4,000 MW each. I mean, that power will come maybe 5 years down the line. Roads can't be constructed overnight. But then you don't expect the budget to do that. What you expect from the budget, if you look at it, I believe in a bipartisan manner. I think this budget is done. Yes, as Pawan said, people don't talk about the fact that excise is increased from 12.36 to 13%. Service tax is increased by a bigger amount to 14% from 12.36. And the corporate tax effective rate on an average has increased and not decreased because the exemptions will go away. So overall, I think the middle class has been helped. Maybe not as much as they should have been because there was a fiscal constraint, and that's why 3.6 next year will be 3.9, and it will be only 3 years down the line that will come down to 3%. Sorry,
right. All right. Right, sure. Just to interrupt you there, Mr. Bajaj, I just want to shift focus now from the corporate aspect to the to the fiscal aspect as well, and bring in Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Dr. Kumar, we had this fascinating debate a few days ago right here on ET Now on whether the government should stick to the fiscal deficit target. You were of the view, you and Mythili were both strongly of the view that the government should not hold itself to the target set by the previous government. Are you happy that the government has not stuck to the red line as far as the fiscal deficit is concerned and given itself slightly more elbow room?
I'm of course very happy because I think that would have been very dogmatic of the finance minister to have stuck to the fiscal deficit target of 3.6. especially at a time when they needed to increase public investment and take their destiny in their own hands. I'm a little surprised, though, that there is a reduction in planned capital expenditure in the budget from the numbers, if I read them correctly, and that comes to me as a surprise as to why that would be the case. But on the other hand, I also thought that they should have had a sharper cut and a greater focus on revenue deficit, which I of course want to go down to zero. Please do remember that interest payments account for almost 49% of net revenues of the government, and that's a very high number. So therefore you do need to bring down the revenue deficit as you go along. Just one other thing which I may say, that I heard Mythili say that this option that the finance minister has given for people to join ESI or EPFO is somehow not good or somehow inequitable. I totally disagree. That was, again, I'm very pleased to say, one of my suggestions that I had got after consultation with Manish Sabharwal. Those two deductions act like a tax on workers' incomes and do not provide them with the services they need. So giving them an option and not making it mandatory is so much better, because it is the workers with the lower wages which are stuck with these two schemes, which don't do very well, and we know about the languishing, the sort of EPFO accounts, etc., which nobody claims. So that's another, by the way, a major step taken to improve manufacturing, because this will reduce the incidence of contract labor and also reduce dualism in the industrial sector by bringing all the workers at the same level and on par. So both on fiscal deficit and on pushing Make in India, I think I'm very happy with the budget.
He's happy with the budget. Mr. Chatterjee, I'm going to throw this to you. While we're all talking about fiscal pragmatism and, they've given themselves elbow room to spend, you actually look at the planned expenditure figure and it's a lot lower than what one would have thought it to be. It's even lower than the revised estimates of last year. Is that disappointing? Is the government abdicating itself of its responsibility? Yes, the devolution to the states have happened, but are they looking at public sector units? Do they want the private sector to come in? Who will do that expenditure?
Look, if you agree with the fundamental proposition that increasingly public expenditure in infrastructure and related works is increasingly going to be done through off-budget vehicles, then this does not disappoint me, because it is the obverse of the same coin. I did an analysis of last year's budget, and if you, for example, take the 12th plan targets, the budget was only subscribing to only 14% of the the infrastructure requirements of the country, even in last year's budget, and the budgets before that were around that figure. So in a budget that does only 14%, whether it falls to 13.5 or it falls to 12, doesn't bother me if I know that the concerted thrust of this establishment, of this government, is to create a slew of off-budget vehicles where foreign sovereign funds, PSUs, proceeds from divestments, asset sales, etc., are put into a national infrastructure kind of fund, and similar other SPVs. Remember, he has just set the ball rolling. There is tremendous creative potential in the government of India providing seed capital and leveraging the strength that it has as a sovereign to create a multiplicity of off-budget vehicles and garner external capital there. So therefore, the point that you raised doesn't bother me. I think it's a logical outcome.
Right. Let's get quick comments from our panelists on whether the budget has cleared the reform test as well. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, do you believe that this budget has that big bang reform idea, given the kind of expectation that was built in the system, the kind of political leadership that we have now, Prime Minister Modi? People expected a disruptive kind of a budget. Is this one such disruptive budget? Do you see a big bang reform idea in the budget?
Well, I don't see a big bang reform sort of announcement in this budget, but I see a series of very important small steps and small measures, but very important ones, with the accumulated effect of which will be a directional change in the way we do things in the economy. And I think and the announcement that have been made, for things to be done going further, I think are also harbingers of the fact that this economy, the way we run the government fisc and the government's own affairs will not be the same after this budget. So in that sense, this budget provides a directional change which will be for the better. And the most important thing of that is that it is going to remove that misconception that there is a trade-off between promoting growth and promoting public welfare. I think the first line that the finance minister said, that this is a budget for accelerating growth, enhancing investment, and improving and getting the benefits of that to the poor. I think that's what this budget is trying to do, and that is what I think will put India onto, will be the directional change as we go forward.
Fair point indeed. Completely running out of time here. Mr. Bajaj, if I may come to you for your final comments. Is this a budget for Achhe Din?
To the extent any budget could have been a budget for Achhe Din, I think this is a budget for Achhe Din. He could have done more things, but as I said, the government doesn't want to spend all its political capital in the first major full year's budget. For example, now, I think they provided 69,000 crores for disinvestment in 15-16. I would have wished it's 100,000 or 1.5 lakh crores worth of disinvestment. They're not doing privatization anyway because politically it's not again acceptable. But why not more and more disinvestment from banks and so many other companies, Air India, many other things, bring that down, bring your public sector equity ownership down at least to 51%. It still remains a government company, and in many companies, including some banks, even below 51%. That could be much more. It will raise more revenue for the government. Only some unions will create a problem, but then sometimes you have to take the bull by the horn. And I don't expect the government to take the bull by the horn on very major issues, but for disinvestment, I would want them to have done that. But I think overall, it's a budget for Achhe Din, to answer your question.
It's a budget for Achhe Din. Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, have they done just use of the political capital that they had? 282 seats in the Lok Sabha, an unprecedented mandate. Have they done justice to the political capital, and what's your rating on the budget on a scale of 10?
My rating on the budget is the same as I told you in the morning. I am actually very pleased with the bouquet of well thought through and coordinated interventions for the infrastructure sector, which itself is the bedrock for driving an investment-led growth. So I would say that I am happy on all counts. I gave it a 9 on 10 in the morning and I stand by it. And I would say that for the infrastructure-driven growth agenda, which this budget, basically it is the maypole around which much of the budget activities are dancing around. This is a budget which is certainly going to get the infrastructure elephant to dance.
Mythili, because it fails the equity test and for you it also fails the reform test, how would you rate this budget while we close this debate now?
Supriya, I think I stick to my stand of 5 upon 10. It's a budget which is riding on, it's a huge gamble on growth and riding on hope. It is a hope of Achhe Din, and I hope I'm proved wrong, because if that hope is actually delivered, we realize that hope, nothing could be better for all of us.
Swami, budget for Achhe Din is what we've been calling it for the last several weeks and months in ET now in the run-up to the budget coverage. Is this a budget for Achhe Din, and what's your rating? Are you as optimistic as Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, or are you as pessimistic as Mythili?
From the start, I've crossed my fingers on the growth, whether this is actually a galloping horse or not. But to the extent that the budget can do something, the direction of it, especially going the ASEAN route, I would say 6.5 out of 10.
6.5 out of 10 is a high rating that Swaminathan Aiyar has given in a
By
long
Swami
time to a
standards,
budget.
for sure.
Yes. With that, it's a wrap here on budget debate. It's been a pleasure getting you all the details on the budget and getting you every view that matters. Sandeep?
That's right. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Mr. Bajaj, Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, Swami, Mythili, thank you so much for analyzing the budget and putting it all in perspective. We'll take a short break here on ET now, but on the other side, the interview with the Minister of State Finance and one of the key architects of the budget, Jayant Sinha. Keep it with ET now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.